Hey, Richard, man. Um, so I know I've donated some money to you, and I usually send you some messages now and again. Now, I don't really have. For me, right? I'm seeing all your posts all over the groups that I'm in, right? So they're already in there. People are already sharing them, right, in the big groups. Some of the other groups I can't post in them, right, because they've got their settings. So if you go on Facebook as a page, right, not as like a normal profile, you can't make posts, right? Groups like the Silence Majority, ironically, right? I could post in that group, but I had an argument with like Mark Dietrich, right? But I'm all right with Nick Arlett, but I don't know why, but he's changed the settings in the group, right? So I can't post on there. I can only like press the likes or read it, right? All he has to do is put the group settings so pages can post. Some of them really, really big groups I can post in there fine, right? But they're just being funny about the settings, and I don't know why that is. I think it's like blockchain. It's like Mark Zuckerberg and Google and the whole lot. It's like they've got us all putting these it's like trying to get a barge down a canal, right? Look, if you're going down a canal with a barge, right, you got to get to the lock, then you got to get off the barge, then you got to open the lock gates, and you got to fucking wind it round. It takes ages. Then you got to change the water level, blah, 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 right, whatever order it's in, right? And it's slow, right? That's how they've got the internet, right? And when you're up against, like, opposition political parties, right, they've got their... they're like sailing, they got like the wind behind them, and it's almost kind of like they're on a whitewater rapid river, right? They haven't got any blocks or obstructions. I know that you're pro-military and you're pro-police, right? But, for people who have had bad experiences with the police, and there's a lot of people who get mistreated by the police, right? Look, the police are getting paid to do what they do, right? They're organised, trained, and paid. They don't say, oh, we want to do this or we want to do that. They turn up and do what they're told. They like the job. They're under rank and file order. It's like, they're like it works like clockwork, like a machinery, right? Clockwork machinery, right? Large numbers of people. Now, can you imagine this? I think this is what you're getting at, like, why aren't we building the movement? Why aren't we sharing everything? Why aren't we getting the figures up? Why isn't everybody working in orchestration? Well, because we don't get along with each other, because we argue, because people are putting stupid group settings on where you can't even make posts. It's difficult to talk to each other. The way it's going, big groups like yours, you're arguing with other key figures like, Tommy Robinson or Fiona Rose Diamond or whatever, and then you've got, Paul Thorpe saying, Rupert Lowe won't reply to me, won't come on my programme and all this, right? So the leaders are in conflict. Look, put it this way. Just imagine, right, if the police chiefs from different forces wouldn't speak to each other, right? If the police chief of Leicestershire wasn't speaking to the police chief of, Somerset, right? If they didn't speak, if they wouldn't talk to each other. So when a court needs to get someone who's at large in Somerset to a court in Leicestershire, right? And the police chief's contacting officers there, right, to send officers out to bring him back to the other county. He didn't answer the fucking radio, right? He couldn't do it, right? If the police were disagreeing on what causes they supported and, we don't want to go turn up and arrest these protesters because we support their cause, they wouldn't, the police ain't going to work. The police aren't there to support or oppose political causes. In fact, there are offences like illegal police canvassing and the Representation of the People Act, right, where they're not meant to get involved in political causes, but they are doing, right? It's a job, right? They do what they're told. Go arrest these people. Go arrest those people. Go turn up, whatever. They're not actually meant to be engaging in really or getting involved in political things at all. They're meant to be going catching criminals in crimes, right? But anyway, it works because they do as they're told and they're under rank and file command. But ironically, right, the police are supposed to exist for us, right? We're meant to turn up, go to a police station, say that something happened. They're meant to send someone out to sort it out and then go get them, go back and then go to court, right? But yet their presence now is in large numbers at all these events, which actually isn't really meant to be in there. It's not actually meant to be. It's event management, right? Event management in things that they're not really supposed to be involved in, right? Can you imagine if they were turning up at polling stations, and under command to not let certain people in to vote for certain parties, right? People would soon be kicking off then. So the problem is, it's very much like, with the Roman invasion, isn't it? When apparently we weren't that organised, or all the different counties have all got different chieftains and supposedly they're in conflict and war with each other. It's definitely that kind of sort of thing going on. But then you've got all these illegal immigrants coming over, no one's stopping them coming into the country and so forth. And then now it seems like they're trying to make out that, a portion of the population is the enemy of the state and needs to be controlled, and we need more surveillance, Then got that Big Brother watch going against that. Look, I don't think the government are acting lawfully. They're definitely not acting lawfully, and this is why we won't be able to achieve or do anything unless we get these rights proved. Firstly, so no one should be getting arrested. Secondly, we shouldn't be obstructed in communication, right? We should be able to communicate back and forth. It shouldn't be like, no one wants to be someone in the comments or a minion, but, it's starting to feel like it's kind of like you've got talkers who are like the people who, are running the big groups or pages, and then you've got the listeners who are just the people in the comments at the bottom, and the speakers are trying to speak to the listeners and getting them to share them stuff. But, like you said, where we're going with it, well, the only way to go with it is if you can get democratic results. Democratic results are compliance or agreement from the government, right? Government and councils. And that's all down to getting people's signatures on things, getting things in writing, or getting the presence. Really, the protesting is only really meant to be to raise the awareness of it, right? I don't think that you're going to pressure the government into doing something by having, 3 million or 6 million or 10 million people at Parliament. I don't think it's going to make a difference, right? You've got to get things signed on paper and get them submitted, but they're censoring all the e-petitions. They won't put them up, So then you're left with all the change.org and 38 degrees ones, which people don't, well, they get a lot of signatures, but a lot of the signatures are sketchy and dodgy, right? I mean, that Silky Carlo and the Big Brother Watch, they're doing court cases, though, so they're trying to fight the state, they're trying to fight the government through the courts, right? But through the civil courts, right? By winning legal cases. But they've been doing some petitions and getting things in Parliament as well. But look, it's all about getting it on paper. It's all about making a case and then getting Parliament to vote on it. That's what it's about. And you need to get your case into Parliament and get them to act on it. But people are saying, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Well, it's actually, that's the communication between us and Parliament, right? You make a representation, you say there's this many people who support it, and you're meant to get your MPs to act. Actually, I think, now, thinking about it, I think if you've got, 282,000 people, but you're wanting to grow it more, or you're wanting to share the videos more, whatever, I think, I actually think that, the 282,000, you need to be getting people to write into their MPs and talk to them. I know that, I leave answering machine messages and I leave answering machine messages with loads of different MPs, even though they're not my MP, because, apparently they, if it's not your MP, they're reckoning they can't take the casework on, but so what? I can still leave them a message and make a point, right? Telephone MPs, right? Ring MPs. Ring David Lammy. Ring, ministers, but ring them on their MP telephone and leave a message. Tell them what we think. That's what we should be doing, right? If 283,000 people rung MPs and tell them, get it sorted, what you think that we should be doing, send them emails, do petitions just from you. It doesn't matter if it's on that e-petitions website or not. The paper ones have got to be read out. Listen, right? If you write it out properly, and if it's like in the correct format, which is quite simple, right? They've got to actually put it on the table in Parliament, and it goes in the journal, on the records of Parliament, the history of Parliament in the journals. Even with one signature, it's your personal complaint and grievance. Get people to write paper petitions and send them in. Their MP's supposed to put it in the bag and read it out, right? 282,000, bits of paper going in. When you send an email to an MP, right, or if you write a letter to an MP, it's not a petition. If you do it as a petition, it goes in the petition bag, gets laid on the table, and it goes in the votes and proceedings of Parliament, right? Votes and proceedings. You're getting in the Parliamentary Journal. Letters to MPs don't go in the Parliamentary Journal, right? This is what it is, and one person, or get your family to sign them or whatever. This is why I was saying that that they should have done that Holborn and St Pancras thing to try and recall Keir Starmer. I think that you can actually do it if you can get 20, 30, 40k signatures in Holborn and St Pancras to recall Keir Starmer. I think that it's doable. You get that in Parliament, right? You got to read it out. It goes in the journal, and it makes history. And it puts pressure on Starmer, even if the MPs don't vote to recall Keir Starmer, right? If you get a certain number of signatures, you're still putting pressure on them, and it goes in the record books, things like that. And what was the other thing that I wanted to say? Look, dude, it's like I need to communicate with you, right? And it's on it's not like I'm just trying to communicate because I've got things to tell you, right? Look, all this Nigel Farage thing, the whole Tice, Farage, reform, the whole package, right? What we're seeing now manifest through social media and the news, right? Look, Farage, right? He used that Talking Pints programme on GB News, right? And he made himself famous, and he didn't pay for any of it. And he knew he was going to be standing for an MP, right? That should have been challenged in the 2024 general election at Clacton in an election petition, right? And they should have given evidence that he Talking Pints contributed to his success in the polls, right? And that it affected the outcome of his election, and but it would have cost someone £5,000 to do that. And like Graham Moore's just challenged Sarah Pochin and they hit him with costs, right? They're trying to frighten people from doing it because they're saying that they'll bankrupt you or whatever, right? Which that's a threat. That's actually a terrorist offence, threatening someone to not bring legal action to do with democratic process, right? All the lawyers, all these top lawyers who are scaring people to threaten that they might get bankrupt if they bring an election petition. It shouldn't be £5,000. There's something definitely wrong with that deposit. There's a controverted election rule where you can petition Parliament about elections, widespread corruption. They're not letting us do it. I've tried. They're blocking us. They're just lying about it. It's in the manual, right? It's in the Erskine May book. They won't let us do it. So they're acting contemptuous and treasonous, right? Now, as for reform, other than Farage with his Talking Pints thing, look, I didn't have any problem with reform's policies, right? I'm not against that party, but I'm standing for truth and fact. And everyone's like, everyone's talking about reform because they think that it's the solution to Starmer and it's going to save us all, right? Although there's other parties are available now, like, Britain First or UKIP or whoever, that there are a few other parties on that side of the spectrum, right? But that Nick Tanconi and Paul Golding and various other groups, right? And then you've got Corbyn, who is against all this digital ID and surveillance tech, but he's like pro-immigration and, this is the future of England, all these illegal immigrants, right? So we've been stitched up good and proper. But look, final point. This is a fact. I'm not lying now, right? And you can check up on this in great detail, right? And this is why I'm like, what's the point? I'm like, I've written to the Speaker of Parliament. I've put everything in writing. I've done it very proficiently and technically detailed, right? Trust me, right? To the Speaker of Parliament. I've done it through e-petitions to Daniel Greenberg, the, standards parliamentary, House of Commons Commissioner for Standards. The Ombudsman is a bit of a pain in the bum because my MP's terrible in signing the complaints off, and I don't think the Ombudsman are very good anyway. I think it's a scam, right? I think the Parliamentary Health Service Ombudsman whole investigation thing is a scam. I don't really think that they properly do anything, and there's a lot of barriers to get your complaint seen to, right? But the Electoral Commission are terrible. The Electoral Commission aren't fit for purpose. They're all, I don't know, they're not doing their job properly, right? Look, the MPs' contact pages, right? All of the MPs have got a contact page. And on that contact page, it's got a telephone number, right? Email address and a postal address, right? The postal address is the House of Commons or the constituency office. It advertises nothing. It doesn't advertise a private company, business for profit, and it's got nothing to do with their election. It's a means of contact, a member of Parliament, of government, who has been elected to serve a job in government, and their election is finished, gone, right? The address at Parliament, Westminster, Palace of Westminster, Parliament, UK, right? That advertises nothing, right? Except other than it is a means to contact Parliament. The email address is, whatever, keir.starmer.mp@Parliament UK, right? It is the email address of Parliament. The phone number, 020, is a London number, right? So it's London, but it's just a number. It doesn't advertise anything. It's a series of numerical numbers which you type in, right, in order to make a connection so you can speak to someone, right, and leave a message. None of those contact methods, right, Donaldson, advertise any for-profit business. Yet, at the bottom of the page now, as a official contact an MP method, right, we got all these social media links. Now, in order to make a visual on those social media links, it tells you what it is. X, right? Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, right? I don't think any of them's got YouTube on, but, they might as well put YouTube on, right? To see it, to see the visual of it, right, it advertises a private for-profit company, which are these platforms. And by the way, these platforms just happen to be implementing all this American foreign policy, which is totally against privacy and the Human Rights Act 1998, Article 8, right? And they're pushing all these blocking and banning stuff, which is actually hindering us from doing well on there, right? Or as well. Now, look, on the MP contact page, on their email address, it doesn't say Hotmail, Outlook, btnet.com, Yahoo, or whatever. The email address is not visually by its own merit advertising a for-profit private company, right? It says at parliament.uk, right? Now, after an MP, if an MP gets loses his seat somehow, or, gets recalled, or there's a general election and there's a new MP on, right? And that MP is not an MP anymore. They cease to be a member of Parliament, right? That telephone number goes, doo, right? It's gone, right? There's no, there's nothing left. It's gone, right? The email address is it's gone, right? They're no longer in use, right? And their address at Parliament, well, Parliament address is the same address for all MPs, but, their name, right? You can't write to them because they're not there, right? So the contact methods, when they cease to be an MP, are meant to go poof into the ether, right? Gone, because they're no longer a member. But by miracle, by magic, right? The Facebook, social media is still there. It still exists. And not only that, they're not an MP anymore, but they seem to have amounted and gathered a following of supporters who they've amounted through Parliament's website page. Some of them, you're trying to gather followers and grow your group now from wherever you can get them, right? But they're managing to follow and grow their little following, right? They're gaining people from it being featured on their MP contact page. Now, look, if you did not vote for Ed Miliband, right? He's your MP, right? If Ed Miliband, he's your MP, right? But you didn't vote for him. You voted for Green Party, right? But you've got Ed Miliband. He's your MP now. You're stuck with him, right? But the election's over, right? He's there to be your MP, right? But yet, if you go onto his Facebook page and Parliament have got it as a official means of contact, Ed Miliband, right? If you go on his page, right, you go on his MP contact page, use this Facebook to contact him, click it, you open it, but it's got election photographs and material all in it, right? Or most of MPs have. I don't know whether Ed Miliband's has, but look, there's 650 MPs and I'm willing to bet at least 500 of them, right, have got loads of election photographs and material. So while you're, going to their messenger to message them or leave a message on their official contact, right, you're being canvassed with all this election material, right? They haven't removed it. They didn't remove it after that. Their page was their election page for candidate. They became the MP. They changed the name to MP. They didn't remove the election material 14 days after the election. It's still on there canvassing, right? And then even after they're not an MP anymore, it's like they're still using that means of contact, which they've been using for MP to get re-elected, right? Now, let me just try to put that into some sort of meaningful context, right? Because people are sort of seduced by social media, right? It's the latest craze, it's the latest trend, it's the latest fashionable thing, right? And it's all singing, dancing, but it only really emerged after 2005 onwards, right? Because everyone was just on normal websites, right? They didn't have this social media of the whole interconnected world, right? And country together on one platform, right? And it's an American platform, remember, right? So, look, if you go onto an MP's contact page, right, and you've got email address, right? You've got email address, you've got phone number, you've got postal address, and then you've got all these social media, right? And you can click on any of them. If you telephone your MP, right, and you're waiting on the phone, right? Sometimes it's got an answering machine message, or sometimes it might play music, right? Like if someone says, "I'll put you on hold," right, and it plays music, right? If you ring the House of Commons in Parliament from that contact page or their constituency office with that phone number, and while you're waiting to either leave a message on the answering phone or for the MP to answer, right, or their secretary, if they played an advertisement saying, re-elect Mike Amesbury or Labour MP, re-elect Mike Amesbury, right? That is an election advertisement running from the House of Commons Parliament or from the MP's constituency, right? It's meant to be completely and totally funded only by the party and, spending for the party and nothing. You can't have the House of Commons telling you to vote for a party, right? It's not lawful. And if you emailed Ed Miliband, and instead of like an autoresponder saying, the House of Commons, you have contacted Ed Miliband MP, make sure you've left your name and address, we'll contact you, whatever. If the autoresponder email had a massive Labour Party advert in it saying, hey, re-elect Ed Miliband, right? People would go absolutely berserk, right? That you'd email the House of Commons Parliament and the MP's email had a Labour Party advert in it saying, re-elect Ed Miliband, particularly if you you voted for Green Party and you never voted for him anyway, but you're stuck with him as your MP, right? Now, that's for email and telephone. Can you imagine if you wrote to your MP in Parliament, right, about, let's say that, you're annoyed with the taxes on, I don't know, cigarettes or something, right? And your MP wrote back to you in a letter in the post from the House of Commons with a header at the top of it with, from the House of Commons Parliament, Ed Miliband MP. And then on the back of it, on the back of the letter, it was printed out, re-elect Ed Miliband, Labour candidate on the back of the letter, right? People would go berserk. So why is it that on the MP contact page, when you click on the given contact method of social media, which is next to all the other ones, email, postal address, and whatever, why is it that when you click on their Facebook page, which is a stated and declared contact method, when it opens and you're like, oh yeah, I'll just put a message to my MP here or whatever, and then what are these photos? And there's all this election material in advert, right? It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing, right, as if they would have had it in a telephone message, in an email, or if they'd sent you it printed out in the post, right? But he was on social media. But no one's complaining about that. No one's saying that it's out of the ordinary or wrong, right? And the Electoral Commission aren't taking it down. In fact, the platforms have been assisting and helping these MPs, right? And also Nick Clegg, remember, Deputy Prime Minister of England, Nick Clegg, was Mark Zuckerberg's best pal buddy, global president, right, at Facebook. And he didn't stop it. And they rushed ahead. And they've done it on purpose. They've broken the law. Meanwhile, right, while they're getting all this extra success out of, having the benefit of their little perk of social media and their election scam going on, right, we are trying to beat and defeat and oppose most of these MPs, right, on the social media that they themselves are using illegally for MP contacts and for elections, which they merged together illegally, right? And our networking and groups, they've got us into arguing with each other and not getting along with each other, and people are blocking and banning each other, and they've got their group settings so, pages can't post in groups and all this type of stuff, weird settings and other obstructions, right? And even people are getting stuff taken down, which is meant to be privileged of Parliament, a political campaign seeking a change in, matters of government, right? Which is, why the Great British Strike exists, to get the government to, sort out all this immigration stuff, right? Our pages, groups and stuff are meant to be protected by the privilege of Parliament, and it's meant to be a contempt for Facebook and YouTube to remove our pages, groups, videos, etc. And yet they're removing some of them, and no one's Parliament are not penalising them. They're not calling Mark Zuckerberg into Parliament. They're not calling Google into Parliament, or Neil Mohan or Sergey Brin to say, why did you take down these political pages, or on YouTube, right? My channel's been removed illegally. They're not enforcing it. I think Facebook are kind of all right. If you contact Facebook and say, it's a political page, I do think I've noticed that they've been putting some back up, right? But not on YouTube. YouTube haven't been restoring them, right? You've got to make the proper claim, though. Google aren't upholding it. I think Mark Zuckerberg, if you say that it's a political page, I think you get it put back up, right? But so we are running with a hindrance from the big platforms, while the MPs have been running with a asset, right? They've been allowed to cheat the election law and make use of social media without penalty, whereas we are having a penalty from YouTube, and then we've also got all these blocks and bans and stuff that we're doing to each other, right? Which is not helping us work together properly. So actually, if it was being properly policed, what the outcome would be is that all of those MPs' pages and campaign things would have had to have been taken down, and they wouldn't really be allowed to have them on the contact pages, and therefore they would be a lot less popular and doing a lot less well, right, than what we should be doing with having less things taken down, less things removed, less people. It's actually really illegal if you've got a political group, or to have it so people can't post in there. It's a public meeting under the Public Meeting Act, and you've got to be lawfully allowed to transact information. So I don't know what Nick Arlett and Mark Dietrich are doing when they've got the silence majority group name, which is a proper wind-up, right? The silence majority. And I ain't even done anything wrong to Mark Dietrich. I don't know why he blocked me. He just got bored of me, he was just like, oh, fuck off, I can't be arsed with you, right? I ain't actually done anything wrong. I was just speaking to him, I bought loads of stickers off him, right? And I was chatting to him on Messenger. It was like a contact, and he was just got bored of me, and he's just like, fuck off. Because I'm bored, a bit effectively, right? I'm bored of you, fuck off, right? How is that gonna, how can the Great British Strike succeed, and how can you share stuff when people who are moderating and adminning groups are just blocking people, or having it so pages can't post in the groups, only normal profiles can post in the groups, right? It's not helping the circulation of things going round, right? But all these MPs are getting illegal circulation through their election material, which is not actually lawful, but the Electoral Commission won't do anything about it, right? So this is where we are with it, and I'm sick of reform. And the MPs, they're just they've just they've thrown caution to the wind, and they've just gone fuck the rules, right? Parliament. And I think nearly every MP is in on it. It's they got them all to do it, so then they're all in. It's like a covenant or a pact, or it's concerted. It's they're all sworn in blood brothers on oath, right? That, okay, we're going to fucking cheat the fucking election law and do social media. Fuck it, right? We're all in. Let's have a revolution, right? And and this is what Nigel Farage is doing with reform. But everyone's oh, reform, our saviours, they're going to save us all, right? And Farage has got all these massive pedestals and reform in massive letters. And all these, big, Suella Braverman and whatever defects to reform. But Farage broke the election law and no one challenged him, and Parliament are promoting and advertising these platforms on their website, so they're actually they are in cahoots with Mark Zuckerberg and Google, right? In fact, they love it, but they're running illegally at the moment. Now, I'm getting fed up of seeing all this reform bollocks all over the internet, right? And Farage, it's pure election crime, and everyone they've got everyone to break the law, like and encouraged it, right? Really, we shouldn't be seeing anything to do with reform. We shouldn't be seeing or hearing anything to do it unless there's an election on in one area, right, of the country, and the people in that area should be seeing the odd private advert from reform popping up on their, screening ads, or getting stuff through the door, right? We shouldn't be hearing about it on the news or people sharing stuff. But what we should be doing is actually all these independent causes and independent groups should actually be doing a hell of a lot better. Like you're saying, oh yeah, why aren't people sharing my stuff? Why is it not circulating more? Why aren't we growing more of a following? Why aren't we getting more high numbers of signatures on petitions to make the MPs do this or that? Or voting in independent MPs who are actually doing what we ask, right? And it's because these parties are completely breaking the law. There's there's a few MPs, right, a handful, maybe like a dozen, who out of 650 who haven't got social media on their MP contact page, who haven't got election material up, right, or haven't even got a social media contact thing. Some of those, like, some of those Irish MPs who are out in the sticks, like farmer ones, or just like there are some independent MPs or the odd Labour Party MP or whatever who's not got he's been won a by-election and not got his page together or whatever, stuff like that. There are a few scarred ones who haven't broken the law just by circumstantial or coincidental circumstances, right? But most of them are fully in on it. But what is it? It is part of what the hell's going on now with all this, right? Okay, we're doing this. They're doing all right. They're like, most of the MPs are like, oh, we're doing this thing. It's called Taking Over the World with Oracle, Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, Google, and facial recognition and the whole thing that Big Brother Watch are campaigning against, and Fiona Rose Diamond, right? All that surveillance thing with a police force and all this illegal immigration in order to justify doing it all, right? And then trying to transform the country instead of having other countries that are our enemies, it's like it's trying to turn folders in on ourselves so we can get the police now to say that half the population are misbehaving, and then we can really cramp up on this, BDI inwards into the country with all these cameras and surveillance and restrictions and more policing, and you can't say what you want in your own house, and everything that you do on your phone is being evaluated by third-party commercial interests, yet it's totally illegal against the Human Rights Act 1998, right? So we're being wrestled by this like wrestling move where they're trying to get their leg behind us while they push us over and get us down. And part of that move is all these illegal immigrants coming in, right? And part of that move then is to press you down on the floor, say that it's us that are the problem, and then, give a good excuse to, chain us down with cameras and more rules and regulations, right? Because we're the one misbehaving, right? That's the wrestling move. And the social media is part of that because they want to spot us all. It's like, they're trying to headhunt and spot us, and it's a good way to get us all excited and riled up. Like when you have a studio audience, right, on TV, and, they get everyone excited, clapping, and, when the show starts and the camera zooms down, they get the audience wild and excited to get into the mood, right? That's what they're doing now. They're like riling us all up, get us all in the mood. Let's get all these little, moles popping up everywhere. It's like, let's see who we're dealing with, who's a contender, right? And then they're like, just basically, it's like on Quantum of Solace, on Quantum of Solace, right, when 007 is at that big meeting and he's going around snapping photos of them all, right, they're getting photos of them all, they're profiling us all, oh, look, Donaldson's up for it, he's a contender, we'll write him down on his list, whatever, put a list together, they're putting together lists of people, who are all following, UKIP or, Paul Golding or whatever, right? They're trying to. They want everything measured with a number on it. They want us stamped like police officers. Like we call the numbers on. They want us all stamped, profiled, strength tested. They want us all like a card game. When you've got one of those. Like when you've got a card game with the characters on there, and they've all got skill, intelligence, strength level, like some kind of role play game, right? Shuffle your card deck. What have you got? Oh, Nigel Farage, popularity, 550, or whatever. Tice, popularity, whatever. I've got Tice, Farage, and Sola Braverman trumps your Keir Starmer now's popularity fucking -50 or whatever. They're trying to do that, and if they can do that and they can get these digital ID cards tagged on everyone, once you've got numbers, right, and you have rules, then everything falls into place. It's this obsession with measuring everything, and regulations on absolutely everything. They want everything to be regulated. I won't be surprised. This video's been running 41 minutes now, right? And I'm still talking, but I've got stuff to say, right? They might, what happens if they regulate, that you can only, have 30 seconds of, a mobile phone talk every day, right? They might do that, or whatever, they want everything to be measurable and therefore under regulations, right? How many people you can have in a meeting or whatever. And that's surely is, the ultimate climate I think that they're wanting to have, it also is like for a side project, is that the whole of society is a controlled blind experiment as well, So they're also running tests on us, right? Once everything's measurable, once they've got all your statistics and numbers and figures on everyone, and everyone's got a popularity number, what do people like or not like, or how they're going to react to this, or we'll put this newspaper story out and see how many people, stop, buying widgets or whatever. Once they do that, another bonus is they can run experiments, science experiments, and measure the outcomes and everything like that. But they think, why wouldn't you want the world to be like that? Why shouldn't scientists have, the whole planet's their laboratory, right? Because then, they don't get the fact that humans, some things, don't need to be measured, or why should you measure everything? Why count every word? It's like that old saying, hey, Mr. Tallyman, tally a banana. Daylight comes and you want to go home. You're back to that situation where, obviously if you go to a bar or pub and you buy a cocktail and he's filling up 5 drinks, and he's got a measuring jug or whatever, and he's filling it up, it's all like, it's all measures and weights, isn't it? This is a thing, measures and weights, not this kind of sort of like natural sort of thing where, it is what it is. And ultimately, that's the thing. But that's what we need to be doing. We need to be, you're a numbers man, right? You're like, how many people has my group performing? How many more views have I got? I've got all these followers, but no one's sharing. Can we get, how many people telephone their MP to complain? How many people have phoned their MP to complain that, all of the MPs are breaking the fucking election law, right? If 282,000 people, right, picked up their telephone and said, hey, why are MPs advertising their political party material on their MP contact page Don't you think that it would be outrageous if they did that on the telephone answering machine and letters and an email autoresponder as well? People would go berserk about it, right? Particularly if you voted for Green Party, but it's a Labour MP's making use of Parliament to advertise his party and to re-elect him, right? Not for his own private campaign. If everyone picked up their phone and did that, I'm quite sure if 282,000 people picked up their phone, rang their MP, left an answering machine message saying, "Why did Farage cheat in talking pints? And why are you all illegally using the internet?" Something will happen. If people email that in, something will happen. Those amounts of numbers on one serious issue, they can't ignore it when it's documented. And this is the thing, right? When you do a petition to Parliament on paper, right? Forget this e-petitions nonsense, right? And trying to get 5 signatures and then they've got to authorise it, whatever, right? If you write it out in paper, right, and it is in the correct form, which isn't hard to do, and it's a grievance about something, right, they've got to lay it on the table. Your MP has got to go in there and put it on the table or in that petitions bag, and it goes in the journal on the records of England, of the whole country, right? Even if you've got one signature, your own signature on it, right? And it goes into votes and proceedings, right? Now, this is the thing with MPs. Currently, they've got us all quarantined in these Michael Westwood e-petitions where, it's just a freaking number. You're just a number. You signed it, Michael Westwood, is a one, I don't like what Labour are doing, I think they went back on their promises, right? And then 3 million numbers, right? What number are you? Oh, I'm, number 1,329,000, I am 1,329,651. That's my number. I signed it, right? But you're not making a statement. You're not personally saying anything. If you write it into Parliament in your own words and terms, right? And you write, "I am absolutely sick of this government cheating and breaking the rules," right? You're all breaking the election law. What the hell are you doing with your contact pages? You're breaking the election law. Why did Nigel Farage cheating talking pints, right? If, 282,000 people do that, and by the way, you don't have to pay a stamp to send it in, that goes in the parliamentary journals, right? And each MP has got to read it out in Parliament, or the clerk. They have to, because it's the rules, right? So you will get things happening, but this is the thing. This is when you start doing things correctly and right, which will succeed. This is when you get these weird incidents happening. Like wild news stories happen and kick off, and things like that. Or there's some sort of emergency plane crash, or fucking Princess Diana has an accident, or whatever, because you're winning and you're going to beat them, and they can't take it. And it's almost like squeezing the toothpaste out of a tube, and they don't like it. And it's like pressure in a pipe system, and then they one of them or one of their buddies or pals or whoever, Rockefeller or whoever, or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, one of them blows a fuse because they can't take it that we're going to win and beat them, right? This is the thing. But they currently got us all locked. I mean, I'm having to record this now, and then I'm going to have to post it on your page. And I don't even know if you listen to it. You're not going to listen to me for 48 minutes, But, you wanted to know why aren't people sharing. I am not on Facebook with my normal private page, and even when I am, which I don't actually log into it that often, my own friends don't have any interest whatsoever at all in all this protesting business, right? And when I do share things, it's usually, this particular thing is because something my friend likes, not what I'm interested in. It's like, I think my friend will like this, right? Because it's the sort of thing they're interested in. So it's specifically just for them, right? And my own page is, I'm doing all the law stuff, right? And everyone finds it boring and they're not interested in it. And, no one comes on my page, right? So I'm going in all the groups to find out all the stuff about what's going on, but everyone's already posting, Great British Strike in all those groups that I'm going, so they're already in there. In fact, they're posting it multiple times, so people are sharing it to the groups. Maybe your 82,000 people, when you divide them, if you say, I'm only getting, 10% of people sharing. Well, how many is that? Well, have you ever thought, what groups are the 282,000 people in? Divide 282,000, right, by, 5,000. The 282,000 people might only be distributed through around 5,000 groups, and those might be the 5,000 groups that are getting shared in, and they've already seen it all, right? How you really want to share it is get to groups that people aren't in, right? Well, the admins and the moderators don't let people share things in groups that are not of that subject. And this is a culture which has been propagated and designed by Mark Zuckerberg. And when he set up Facebook and it's taken off, there's a culture on Facebook where moderators and admins, who are these social controllers, right, bosses, social bosses, right? How can we spread the word and share it? Well, you share the groups that are about these issues already know about them. So you want to get to groups that don't know about it or that it isn't about, but they won't let you post in those groups. Let's take, for example, ancient ridgeways and trackways of England, right? Giles's group, right? Got 100,000 members, 100k members, right? Or probably more now. I ain't been on there for ages. But they're all interested in going out in the countryside, walking on the ridgeway, right? And ancient sites. They've got group rules. No political posts in this group, right? Or if it's not on subject, someone complains in the group or must grumble and asks for it to be removed. How can you reach more people? How can you reach more people if the social climate of Facebook is that we don't accept any political talk in this group or anything off subject? You can't actually get to new people. You can't get to new groups because it's contained within the groups that are only on that subject, right? Now, this is the irony of all that, right? In England, in a public meeting, right? In any public meeting, you've got a legal right to transact information, right? Under the Public Meeting Act, and it's illegal to be removed or prevented from giving information, right? But they've got everyone under policy. It's almost like an umbrella company policy. Now, if the whole social law, if everyone uses Facebook in the whole country, right, and everyone's under this corporate umbrella policy of Facebook, then the whole country is under a policy of you can only talk about, tennis in a tennis group, right? We don't accept it. So you can never, ever go into a new group of people and actually introduce a political subject to them because you're not allowed to have a political discussion in there, right? So what they're actually doing, theoretically, is banning the expansion of political subjects to grow and spread because you're not allowed to do it because you've agreed to consent to accept all these social bosses' rules. Right? So how can you grow and spread a political cause? Now, that's illegal because you've got the right to petition and canvass the cause without being prosecuted. So legally, there's nothing in law that could prevent you from doing that. But it's not the law, is it? It's just a little agreement. It's like a little social agreement, a little policy, right? And this is the whole thing with Facebook's policy and YouTube. We don't have Section 230 in England of the Online Decency Act, and they've got no legal right to remove our political content because it's illegal. And admins and moderators don't have a legal right to remove political content. So if you go into a tennis group and if you ask them if they want to sign a petition or join, Great British Strike and sign up because they're opposing Starmer, right? You've got a legal right to do that, and there's no law in England which can stop you. But they've got their little policy agreement, and they made you, do the Hitler sign. Zick Heil before you join the group, get down onto your knees and, beg to the admins and moderators, make a little oath that you'll swear by the rules, no political talk. But that's not the law of England. So who's propagated this system? And why is it that everyone's only using Facebook and Instagram and Threads and they're all owned by Mark Zuckerberg? That's a monopoly, right? If you read Sir Edward Coke in the books that I'm reading now on the laws of England, which tells us about all his political rights, they've also got the law of monopolies. It's illegal to have a monopoly. Where are all the platforms that don't encourage people to not talk about political things? Where are all the English platforms that are started in England? There aren't any. Notice that our government are advertising all Mark Zuckerberg's products on their website or X, right? Or they're not putting TikTok on there, it's Chinese, right? Or Google. Well, they don't even have YouTube on there because YouTube's Google, right? All of the they could have YouTube on there, but they don't. But Parliament's advertising YouTube instead for its own videos, like all the court hearings or the petitions committee things are on YouTube, right? So they do use YouTube, but it's not on the MP contact page, right? But right, all of the Blue Sky. Well, Blue Sky is that Jack guy, but he was friends with Elon Musk, wasn't he? And the people who started Twitter. But then they've got Threads, Instagram and Facebook. They're all owned by the same person, Mark Zuckerberg. So that's a monopoly. It's Mark Zuckerberg's monopoly on social media. Where are all the other platforms that don't have all these ridiculous policies and don't have administrators and moderators and don't block and ban people and don't have propagation of these policies which restrict the growth of political discussion to introduce it to new people, right? There aren't any. The government are assisting Mark Zuckerberg's triple platform monopoly and a new social order introduced to the whole planet by agreement and consent, accept, right? Through policy regulation, which isn't law of the country. And by the way, using Section 230 in England is illegal, right? It's a genius master plan. And I think that Sergey Brin on Google has illegally suppressed and defeated all other search engines and competitors, right? And made himself into a multi-billionaire and taken over planet Earth. And where are all of the other search engines? And why are they naff? I could actually make a search engine which would fucking be, if I wanted to, and if I weren't distracted by all this, right? I could make a search engine which was, Google would look shit, right? It would be shit, right? Sergey Brin is a coder, right, who sold his soul to advertising, and there's no limit. He's all in to take over planet Earth. It's all in for money with these big handshake people. He's definitely got connections to Russia, right? And he's created a monopoly, and it's illegal. It's an illegal monopoly. And Mark Zuckerberg as well. They both sold their souls to Satan. They're breaking EU law because they're forcing us by policy agreement, forced to give over our privacy at home to private for-profit companies when the Human Rights Act says that you can't force someone's privacy unless there's an urgent, pressing social need, and you can't have an ulterior motive. Well, it's social media that's using it for private corporate benefits. And there's not even an urgent pressing social need for social media. It's a novelty. It's a perk. It's an extra added bonus to normal life. You've already got social socialising. You've got a telephone, you can write to people, you can go around to someone's house and knock on their door. You can live life without social media. It's an asset bonus. It's not an urgent pressing need for it, right? They want to get us on here so they can profile us and check us all out, right? Now, the Human Rights Act Article 8 protects your privacy, and it's European law. All these platforms are coming in on a monopoly from America under Mark Zuckerberg, right? And they've just updated their policy, so you consent to do it, right? It's not legal in Europe, and no one has actually taken him to court, and I don't know why that is. I think they're suppressing people money for it, or coming together in groups. But people just don't want to talk to each other. I want to talk to Alan Robertshaw about this, and Black Belt Barrister, Steve Barrett, Big Brother Watch, and Silky Carlo's like, oh, well, they're not letting us be successful. No one wants to collaborate with each other, right? Bigs don't want to collaborate. Alan Robertshaw doesn't want to collaborate. Want to collaborate with me. Fiona Rose Diamond want to collaborate with me. Donaldson want to collaborate with Robinson. Doesn't want to talk to Donaldson. Rose Diamond doesn't want to talk to Donaldson. Paul. Paul Thorpe. Can't get Rupert Lowe on his show. What go on there? We're all. There's some. This is why we're getting absolutely plastered and wasted by the police, because there's no, that they do what they're told. But this is the thing. They're not, it's not an army. We're not being invaded. We're not supposed to, the police aren't meant to be an army that turns up like in some fucking Roman army rank and says like, right, take these protesters out. They're not meant to be allowed to act against protesters. We're immune, protected, right? The police are supposed to be in a police station and someone rings them up for a crime and they're supposed to go get the criminals, right? They're meant to be at the call of the public. That's meant to be the thing, but it seems now like they're amassing and coagulating into this force which is always present when there's protesters there who are using political rights, right? As if some kind of some pose, and people are getting arrested, yet they're not allowed to arrest anyone, and, Parliament aren't calling them in because Parliament are sending them there, right? Against the law, just like they're doing their election stuff against the law. So, what's the situation? The situation is this. This Parliament is in contempt and treason, and they're not holding any proceedings. They're not letting us publish the petitions to make and force them to hear allegations in Parliament against each other, which means they won't prosecute each other. They won't they won't have sex in Parliament. And I don't mean sex, I'm talking metaphorically, right? They won't fuck each other, right? Like Boris Johnson in front of the committee, right? Because they're all parties, they're all a team now, and it's like, and they're actually against us. Rather than just being elected to serve us, and then when you send complaints in, right, things get done. So, what's Daniel Greenberg doing? What's the Parliamentary Health Service Ombudsman doing, right? It doesn't matter. When we complain about them, right, they're meant to face punishment. They're meant to be democratically accountable to us in Parliament, and they can't get their head around that. And when the police act against us unlawfully, they're going to be calling to Parliament to be punished. Parliament is not working as it should. It's they've taken our power out of it, and the main political parties have taken over and dominated it, and they're using the police as their own personal police, the Conservative Party and Labour Party police. And if any of those members of those groups step out of line with their whips and so forth, then they'll get harassed and badgered by the police, like Andrew Bridgen, if you don't toe the line, you get kicked out of the party. And a lot of the Conservatives are jumping ship now to reform, and Starmer, he's the worst Prime Minister in history, and Labour, how are they even still in the government with all these petition signatures? They're in absolute defiance. Every single day that Labour stay in government, they're defying the people, right? The people want change, and then Farage just, claiming that he's going to change it all when he broke the election law to get there. He didn't want to do it by the rules, but it's very difficult to do it playing by the rules, near impossible. That's what happened to Robert F. Kennedy in America. Robert F. Kennedy tried to take on the big boys, the big players, and they crushed him, they wrestled him, They threatened him with court because he didn't fill the forms in properly, and apparently he would have lost no matter what he would have done, right? So that means that it's clearly a corrupt system, which means that they're not good sportsmanship. And when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did a lot less wrong in America than what Nigel Farage is doing wrong in England, and he's actually dominating within the whole party, right? Robert F. Kennedy got rugby tackled very unfairly in America, yet Farage is being given the full wind in his sail from the media and social media, and Parliament are completely and totally scandalously, treasonously and contemptuously breaking the election law. They should all be disqualified from the next elections. There should be a general election called, and Parliament should be prorogued, dissolved, whatever, and they should all be banned. And all the main political parties should be disqualified from ever standing again. In fact, they should be prosecuted, the main political parties. They should be prosecuted for widespread election corruption. And the political parties, even the Green Party, Lib Dems, they should all be disbanded and branded as... I don't know whether they could be branded as terror groups, but they're criminal. It's a concerted plan to break election law, right? So that's where we are with it. And, if every single person knew this and rung their MP or emailed them or did a paper petition into Parliament about it, then we would definitely get something done about it. They couldn't ignore it. But we are having problems with communication, right? You're trying to grow, and then we've got people like Russell Brand who could do it with a click of his fingers or with a whisper. He's got 6 million followers, right? But he's even getting attacked. They're bringing charges against Russell Brand, but Russell Brand only repeats things that has already been put out in the news. If someone flies a building into the Twin Towers, then Russell Brand will talk about it on his show. He did promote that Don't Pay UK campaign, but then he got taken in. That's what started all his troubles, right? Because he told people not to pay their electric bills. We don't have the privilege anymore of being able to refuse to pay taxes because it's all, when you buy something, it's not individual businesses anymore. It's all BP or Tesco's. You pay with your card. The tax is all figured in. If we were, people used to be able to protest and not pay the taxes, right? If everything's a private, a family business, right, and in the village. And then the village is annoyed with the government and they say, right, we're not paying his taxes. And then people can still buy bread because they go to the baker, who's their friend. And he's in part of the village and they know the baker and he says, I'll sell you all bread, but we, I want to charge you the tax. And when the taxpayer comes, the tax guy comes around, we won't give him it, right? And then what if he gets the sheriff? Well, what if the whole village fucking protests against one sheriff or whatever? You can't do that anymore. You ain't got the leverage like with the shipping tax complaints. They might lock a few of them up, but, they can't lock everyone up, right? Might chuck a couple of people in prison, right? The leverage in the 1600s that you had on things like taxes, but that's impossible now because when all the shops in the village are owned by Spar or Tesco's or whatever, they don't give a fuck about your political cause. You go pay on your credit card and it's all plastic, right? It's all built in. And this is the way they're progressing to. And then they say you'll own nothing and be happy or whatever. We haven't got any control. We haven't got any democratic power, right? The plastic credit card gives Tesco the power, right? Tesco are automatically collecting the revenue on behalf of the government. They've been charging us VAT illegally in the newspapers after the newspapers had the balls, right, to do that whole Lord Hanningfield scandal that he'd been scamming his taxes, and then Nicola Brooke was in front of the fucking government, right, or whatever. The newspapers, like, speak to man because my face ain't listening, right, the Trinity Press, who are pure evil, they don't want, they want to tell us everything, but they don't want us to tell them nothing anymore, right? When you start talking about tax, they won't even answer you, they won't reply, they want to be officially recorded with a statement, right? They won't talk to us about it. They're charging us tax illegally. You're saying, how can I expand the Great British National Strike? Well, you could have the front page, like Tesco and Sainsbury, right? Have like the front page of every newspaper. Why haven't you got the British National Strike wrapped around the front cover of like the Sun